April 30th, 1975. A single tank, number 843, rolls through the gates of Saigon's presidential palace. Inside, South Vietnamese generals are burning documents, fleeing through back doors. On the roof of the American embassy, the last helicopter lifts off. Marines use rifle butts to push back desperate Vietnamese clinging to the skids. Some fall, 30 feet onto concrete. This is how it ends. The United States of America, the nation that defeated Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan, just lost to rice farmers. We had B-52 bombers that could level cities. They had AK-47s and homemade traps. We dropped more explosives on Vietnam than on all of Europe in World War II. And we still lost. 58,220 Americans never came home. 3 million Vietnamese died. $1 trillion in today's money vanished into the jungle. Here's what they didn't tell you in school. This war was lost before the first American soldier set foot in Vietnam. The Pentagon knew it. The CIA knew it. Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, they all knew it. They sent those 58,000 kids anyway. Over the next 3.5 hours, you'll hear the story they don't teach. The phantom naval battle that never happened but triggered a decade of war. The massacre where American soldiers murdered 500 civilians, including 173 children, is less than #0. 5# is greater than the secret bombing of Laos, 2.75 million tons, more than all of World War II. You'll discover why the most bombed country per capita in history wasn't Germany or Japan. It was Laos. And those bombs are still killing children today. But here's why this matters right now. In 2001, we did it again in Afghanistan. 20 years, $2 trillion. Helicopters fleeing while the Taliban rolled in. Same ending. Different country. In 2003, Iraq. Weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist. Just like the Gulf of Tonkin attack that never happened. The lesson was clear in 1975. We didn't learn it. This is how a nation of farmers defeated 2 empires. Not through firepower. Not through technology. But by understanding something the Pentagon forgot. You cannot force a people to accept a government they don't want. And when one side is willing to sacrifice everything while your side just wants to go home, you've already lost. But to understand how it ended, we need to see how it began. Geneva, 1954. Diplomats from 5 great powers gathered to solve the Vietnam problem. They drew a line across a map. The 17th parallel. Temporary, they promised. Just until elections in 1956. Those elections never happened. That line killed 3.5 million people. May 7th, 1954, is less than #own, 5# is greater than Dien Bien Phu. A remote valley in northwestern Vietnam, surrounded by jungle-covered mountains. For 56 days, 16,000 French troops have been under siege. 40,000 Viet Minh soldiers, commanded by General Vo Nguyen Giap, encircle them. The French thought this position was impregnable. Mountains too steep for enemy artillery. Jungle too thick for supply lines. They were wrong. Giap did the impossible. His forces hauled heavy artillery, piece by piece, through mountains the French called impassable. Disassembled guns, carried on backs, pulled by hand, through jungle, up cliffs, across rivers. Then they dug the guns into the mountainsides, camouflaged them perfectly. The French never saw them coming. When Giap's artillery opened fire, it shattered French confidence. The French artillery commander, Colonel Charles Piroth, had guaranteed air superiority and artillery dominance. When Viet Minh shells started falling, he realized his mistake. Piroth walked into his bunker, pulled the pin on a grenade, held it to his chest. He was the first of many French officers who would die at Dien Bien Phu. For 56 days, the Viet Minh tightened the noose. French airstrips destroyed, resupply impossible, soldiers starving, wounded piling up. May 7th, the fortress falls. Over 10,000 French soldiers captured. Marched through jungle to prison camps is less than #0. 5 is greater than half will die in captivity. France's colonial empire in Indochina is finished. 2 months later, Geneva. The Geneva Conference convenes to settle the First Indochina War. Representatives from France, Vietnam, China, Soviet Union, United States, Britain. The agreement they reach will shape the next 20 years. Vietnam, temporarily divided at the 17th parallel. North controlled by Ho Chi Minh's communist government. South controlled by Emperor Bao Dai's state of Vietnam. Temporary. That word is crucial. The Geneva Accords explicitly state this division is provisional. Not a permanent border. Just an administrative line. Nationwide elections scheduled for July 1956. 2 years. Then Vietnam reunifies, under whoever wins. Free and fair elections. International supervision. One Vietnam. That's the plan. It will never happen. Because everyone knows who would win those elections. Ho Chi Minh. President Eisenhower will later write in his memoirs, I have never talked or corresponded with a person knowledgeable in Indochinese affairs who did not agree that had elections been held as of the time of the fighting, possibly 80% of the population would have voted for the communist Ho Chi Minh. 80%. So the United States makes a decision. The elections cannot be allowed to happen. America will replace France in Vietnam. And the temporary division will become permanent is less than shown. 5 is greater than the seeds of the Vietnam War are planted in Geneva. In the refusal to honor an agreement, in the fear of democratic elections, in the belief that America knows better than the Vietnamese people what's good for them. 20 years of war. 58,000 Americans dead. 3 million Vietnamese dead. All because of elections that never happened. After Geneva, the United States needs someone to lead South Vietnam. Emperor Bao Dai is useless. A French puppet living in luxury on the French Riviera. Never commands respect. America finds their man. No Din Diem. A Vietnamese nationalist. Anti-communist. Catholic in a Buddhist country. Lived in exile in the United States. Spent time in a seminary in New Jersey. Perfect. In June 1954, Bao Dai appoints Diem Prime Minister. With American backing. October 1955. Diem holds a referendum, asking South Vietnamese to choose between him and Bao Dai. Diem wins. 98.91% of the vote. In Saigon, Diem receives 605,000 votes. Problem: only 450,000 registered voters in the city. Even his American advisors are embarrassed. They suggested he win by 60 or 70%. Make it believable. Diem refused. Wanted overwhelming mandate. This is America's partner. The man will support for the next 9 years is less than Hajon. 5 hash is greater than. Diem declares himself President of the Republic of Vietnam. Refuses to participate in the 1956 nationwide elections mandated by Geneva. America backs him completely. Why hold elections when we already know the result? Better to have a reliable anti-communist ally, even if nobody voted for him. The United States pours money into South Vietnam. $250 million annually by the late 50s. 80% military aid. 20% economic. By 1960, over 900 American advisors are in South Vietnam. They're not advising. They're training, arming, building an army. But there's a problem. General Matthew Ridgway, U.S. Army Chief of Staff, warns against getting involved in another Asian land war. Korea just ended. 50,000 Americans died there. For a stalemate, he writes a classified report, warning that Vietnam would require massive troop commitments, difficult terrain, no clear objectives, high casualties. His warnings are ignored because American policymakers believe in the domino theory. If Vietnam falls to communism, then Laos falls. Then Cambodia. Then Thailand. Then Malaysia. Then Indonesia. Eventually, all of Southeast Asia becomes communist. The dominoes must not fall. So, America commits to South Vietnam, to Diem's government, to preventing elections, to stopping communism is less than Hajon. 5 hash is greater than. There's just one fundamental problem. Almost nobody in South Vietnam, outside of Saigon's elite, actually wants Diem's government. Peasants in the countryside don't care about communism versus capitalism. They care about land reform. They care about corrupt officials. They care about foreign armies on their soil. First, the Japanese. Then the French. Now, the Americans. To them, this isn't about ideology. It's about independence. But America doesn't understand that. Or doesn't want to. So, we build our house on sand. And wonder why it keeps collapsing. Diem is not a benevolent leader. He's paranoid, authoritarian, nepotistic. He fills government positions with family members. His brother, Nugo Din Nu, runs the secret police. His sister-in-law, Madame Nu, becomes de facto First Lady. Diem's policies alienate the population. In North Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh consolidates power through brutal land reform. Communist cadres execute landlords and wealthy farmers. Estimates range from 10,000 to 15,000 killed. Even General Giap later admits, "We executed too many honest people." But in the South, Diem's policies are just as destructive. He replaces elected village chiefs with appointees from Saigon, strangers who don't know the local people, often corrupt, always resented. He arrests anyone suspected of communist sympathies. By 1958, over 25,000 people imprisoned is less than Hashon. 5 is greater than. He passes Decree 1059. Anyone who committed acts of sabotage or activities against the state can be executed. No trial necessary. The definition of sabotage is broad. Criticizing the government qualifies. So does refusing to move to a strategic hamlet. And here's the crucial mistake. Diem refuses to recognize the resistance fighters who fought against the French as patriots. Many of these veterans stayed in South Vietnam after Geneva. They assumed they'd be honored. Instead, Diem arrests them. These aren't ideological communists. They're nationalists who fought foreign occupation. Now, the South Vietnamese government treats them as enemies. What do you think they do? They go back to the jungle. They pick up their weapons again. Diem is creating his own insurgency. Then there's the religious issue. Diem is Catholic. Vietnam is 75% Buddhist. He favors Catholics in government appointments, military promotions, land distribution. Buddhist pagodas are taxed. Catholic churches aren't. Buddhist villages receive less aid. Catholic refugees from the north get preferential treatment. The Buddhist majority feels persecuted. They're right. And when they protest, Diem cracks down harder. By the late 1950s, South Vietnam is a pressure cooker. Diem's repression is creating exactly what America fears: a communist insurgency. Not because of ideology is less than #0. 5 is greater than because of Diem's own policies. January 1959. The North Vietnamese Politburo meets in Hanoi. They debate what to do about the South. Ho Chi Minh favors patience, political struggle, wait for the right moment. But Southern revolutionaries are desperate. Diem is arresting and executing their comrades. If they don't fight back, the movement will be destroyed. The Politburo authorizes protracted armed struggle. Translation: insurgency. The Ho Chi Minh Trail is established. A network of paths running through Laos and Cambodia, connecting north and south, allowing weapons, supplies, and fighters to move south. December 1960. The National Liberation Front is formed. A political organization representing various anti-Diem groups. Communists, yes, but also Buddhists, students, farmers, intellectuals, anyone opposed to Diem's regime. Their military wing, the People's Liberation Armed Forces. But Saigon government and American media give them a different name. Viet Cong, short for Vietnamese Communist, meant to be derogatory. The name sticks. The Viet Cong have significant advantages. They're local. They know the terrain. They speak the dialects. They blend with the civilian population. They're fighting on their own land. ARVN soldiers are often from different regions. They don't know the villages they're supposed to defend is less than #0. 5# is greater than. They're seen as outsiders. Sometimes as occupiers. Lo Ly Hayslip, a Vietnamese woman who lived through the war, later writes, "The Viet Cong were our neighbors. They did not insult us or make fun of our customs. When they asked for something, they always said, 'Please' and 'Thank you.'" Contrast with ARVN or American troops, who often treated villagers with suspicion or contempt. Searched homes roughly. Confiscated rice. Sometimes worse. By 1961, the Viet Cong control large areas of the countryside. Edward Lansdale, a legendary CIA operative who knows Vietnam well, sends a memo to the Pentagon. The Oi Van is in critical condition. The Viet Cong are winning. President Kennedy inherits this situation and has to decide: commit more resources or let South Vietnam fall. America is about to dramatically escalate its involvement. Because we can't let the dominoes fall. Even if that means fighting a war we don't understand. Against an enemy we can't see. For a government nobody wants. What could go wrong? January 20th, 1961. John F. Kennedy's inaugural address. Let every nation know, whether it wishes us well or ill, that we shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe, to assure the survival and the success of liberty. Beautiful rhetoric. Disastrous foreign policy. Kennedy inherits 900 American advisors in Vietnam is less than has own. 0# is greater than. By the time he dies, there'll be 16,000. His Secretary of Defense is Robert McNamara, former president of Ford Motor Company, a numbers guy, believes everything can be quantified, analyzed, optimized. War is just another management problem. Apply systems analysis. Measure inputs and outputs. Victory is inevitable. McNamara will be wrong about nearly everything. Kennedy also inherits the Cold War at its peak. Soviet Union testing nuclear weapons. Berlin Wall goes up. Cuban Missile Crisis looming. Communism spreading across the Third World. Kennedy's military strategy is flexible response. Instead of just nuclear weapons, develop conventional forces for limited wars. Counterinsurgency. Special forces. The Green Berets. Vietnam becomes the testing ground. In May 1961, Kennedy sends 400 Green Berets to Vietnam to train South Vietnamese forces in counterinsurgency tactics. October 61. He sends General Maxwell Taylor to assess the situation. Taylor recommends sending 8,000 combat troops. Kennedy hesitates. He knows this could spiral. It's like taking a drink, he tells an aide. The effect wears off, and you have to take another. But he can't afford to look weak on communism. Republicans are already calling him soft. If South Vietnam falls, they'll crucify him. So Kennedy compromises. He won't send combat troops is less than #0. 5 is greater than yet. But he'll dramatically increase military advisors and support personnel. December 61. 11,300 American military personnel in Vietnam. December 62. 11,300. They're not technically combat troops. They're advisors. But they fly helicopters. They coordinate airstrikes. They go on patrols with ARVN units. They shoot and get shot at. The distinction between advisor and soldier blurs. Kennedy also approves Strategic Hamlets Program. Force rural villagers to relocate into fortified compounds. Separate them from Viet Cong. Cut off VC support. By September 62, 4.3 million villagers have been moved into over 3,000 strategic hamlets. Problem: Vietnamese villagers don't want to leave their homes. Their rice paddies, their ancestral graves. These aren't just practical concerns. They're spiritual ones. Being forced into barbed wire compounds feels like imprisonment, not protection. The program breeds resentment. More villagers sympathize with the Viet Cong. Another American policy backfires. By late 62, Kennedy is privately expressing doubts. Tells aides he plans to withdraw after 64 election. We'll never know if he would have. But publicly, he keeps escalating. Keeps sending more advisors. Keeps supporting DM. Keeps insisting we're winning is less than #. 5 is greater than we're not. The UH-1 helicopter arrives in Vietnam in 1962. The hue, its distinctive whop 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 sound, will become the signature of the war. American military planners are excited. Helicopters offer mobility, can insert troops anywhere, can evacuate wounded quickly, can provide fire support. Game changer. January 2nd, 1963. Battle of Ap Bac. The first major test of American helicopter tactics. ARVN intelligence reports 350 Viet Cong in the village of Ap Bac. The ARVN 25th Division, 2,000 troops with American advisors and helicopter support, moves to attack. Should be easy. It's a disaster. The Viet Cong don't run. They fight. They've learned to aim low. Shoot at the vulnerable belly of helicopters. 5 Hueys go down. ARVN commanders are incompetent and cowardly. They refuse to commit troops. They ignore American advisors' suggestions. They watch from a safe distance. American advisor Lieutenant Colonel John Paul Vann is furious. He radios for ARVN commanders to close the trap. They refuse. By day's end, 80 ARVN soldiers dead, 100 wounded, 3 American advisors killed, 5 helicopters destroyed. Viet Cong losses? 18 killed. And the VC hold the field. They withdraw at their leisure after dark. Taking their weapons, their wounded, most of their dead is less than Hashon. 5 hash is greater than ARVN, and American commanders claim victory. They killed 18 VC. Mission accomplished. But journalists on the ground report the truth. This was a humiliating defeat. 2 crucial lessons from APBAC. First, American technology doesn't guarantee victory. The Viet Cong learned to fight helicopters. When they heard choppers coming, they held their ground. They aimed carefully. They brought them down. More importantly, they used American airstrikes and artillery as an early warning system. When bombs started falling, they knew ground troops were coming. So they prepared. Second lesson. ARVN has serious problems. Poor leadership. Officers more concerned with political loyalty than military competence. Soldiers with little will to fight. Despite American weapons, training, and advisors, these problems won't be fixed. They'll still exist in 1975 when South Vietnam collapses. But in early '63, American officials insist everything is fine. We're winning. Just need more time. More advisors. More helicopters. The lying has already begun. June 11th, 1963. A busy intersection in Saigon. A light blue car stops. Several Buddhist monks get out. One monk, Thich Quang Duc, sits down in lotus position on the pavement. Another monk pours gasoline over him. Thich Quang Duc strikes a match. He bursts into flames, is less than #3. 0 hash is greater than. For 10 minutes, he sits perfectly still. Doesn't scream. Doesn't move. Meditating as his body burns. Journalist Malcolm Brown photographs the entire thing. The image goes around the world. An old monk, engulfed in flames, sitting in perfect stillness. The ultimate protest. Why? Diem's persecution of Buddhists has reached a breaking point. In May, Diem's troops fired on Buddhist protesters in Hue, killed 9 people, including children. Diem claimed it was Viet Cong who did the shooting. Nobody believed him. Buddhists across South Vietnam began protesting, demanding religious equality, demanding Diem step down. Diem's response? Crack down harder. His sister-in-law, Madame Nu, makes it worse. She calls Thich Quang Duc's self-immolation a barbecue. Says She'd be happy to provide gasoline for more monk barbecues. Americans watching from Washington are horrified. This is our ally? 5 more monks self-immolate over the next few months. Each time, protests grow larger. August 21, 63. Diem's brother Nu orders raids on Buddhist pagodas across South Vietnam. Special forces storm temples. Arrest 1,400 monks and nuns. Beat many. Kill some. Kennedy administration realizes Diem has to go. The problem? South Vietnam is falling apart. We can't fight the Viet Cong and Diem's internal enemies at the same time is less than has shown. 5# is greater than. Ambassador Henry Cabot Lodge receives instructions. Find generals willing to stage a coup. Let them know America won't interfere. November 1st, 1963. AR Van generals launch their coup. Surround the presidential palace. Diem and his brother Nu escape through underground tunnel. Hide overnight in Cholon, Saigon's Chinatown district. In a Catholic church. Morning of November 2nd, they negotiate surrender. Generals promise safe passage out of the country. They're lying. An armoured personnel carrier picks up Diem and Nu. On the way back to headquarters, both brothers are shot multiple times. Then stabbed. Their bodies arrive riddled with bullets. When Kennedy hears the news, witnesses say he goes pale. Rushes out of the meeting. America didn't order the assassination, but we gave the green light for the coup. We knew what might happen. Now, South Vietnam descends into chaos. 5 governments in 2 years. Each one more unstable than the last. 3 weeks later, November 22nd, 1963. Dallas, Texas. President Kennedy is assassinated. Lyndon Baines Johnson becomes president. Inherits 16,000 American advisors in Vietnam. 100 American soldiers dead. A chaotic, unstable South Vietnamese government. And a Viet Cong insurgency that's growing stronger. Johnson's advisors tell him, "We can't afford to lose Vietnam is less than #0. 5# is greater than. The dominoes will fall. America's credibility is at stake." LBJ doesn't want this war. He wants to focus on domestic policy, the Great Society, civil rights, Medicare, poverty programs. But he's terrified of being the president who lost Vietnam. Terrified of being called soft on communism. Terrified of what happened to Truman when China fell. So he'll escalate. But he needs a reason. Something to justify sending combat troops. A clear attack on American forces. In August 1964, he'll get one. Or at least, he'll claim he did. Lyndon Johnson doesn't want to be a war president. He has dreams. The Great Society. Medicare for the elderly. Medicaid for the poor. Civil rights legislation. Voting rights. War on poverty. He wants to be remembered as a domestic reformer. The president who finished FDR's New Deal. Instead, he'll be remembered for Vietnam. He privately calls it that bitch of a war. But it's an election year, 1964. His opponent is Barry Goldwater, a hawkish Republican senator from Arizona. Goldwater's calling LBJ soft on communism, suggesting the use of nuclear weapons in Vietnam. Johnson is terrified of looking weak. He remembers what happened to Harry Truman when China fell to communism in 1949. Republicans destroyed Truman, accused him of losing China is less than Hashone. Zero hash is greater than ended democratic control of foreign policy for a generation. Johnson will not be the president who lost Vietnam. But he's trapped. In December 1963, Defense Secretary McNamara reports South Vietnam is in danger of collapsing within 2 to 3 months. The Viet Cong control most of the countryside. ARVN is demoralized and incompetent. The Saigon government changes every few months. Nothing is working. Johnson's advisors present him options. 1. Withdraw American support. Let South Vietnam fall. Accept the political consequences. 2. Send American combat troops. Fight the war ourselves. Massive commitment. 3. Bomb North Vietnam. Pressure them into stopping support for the Viet Cong. Hope South Vietnam stabilizes. Johnson chooses option 3. But to bomb North Vietnam, he needs congressional authorization. And he needs a good reason. So his administration begins covert operations designed to provoke North Vietnam. They're called OPLAN 34 Alpha. OPLAN 34 Alpha begins in February 1964. Covert raids against North Vietnamese coastal installations, sabotage missions, psychological warfare, maritime attacks. South Vietnamese commandos in fast patrol boats, supported by US Navy, attack radar stations, bridges, military facilities along North Vietnam's coast. These aren't small operations, is less than #0. 5# is greater than their acts of war. But they're classified. American public doesn't know. Congress doesn't know. Even most of the military doesn't know. At the same time, the US Navy conducts DeSoto patrols. American destroyers sail close to North Vietnamese coast, gathering intelligence, monitoring radar, testing responses. July 30th, 1964. OPLAN 34. Alpha boats attack North Vietnamese islands, Hon Mi and Hon Nu. Significant damage. August 1st. USS Maddox, a destroyer conducting DeSoto patrol, enters the Gulf of Tonkin. Sailing about 8 miles off North Vietnamese coast. North Vietnam thinks Maddox coordinated the raids, or at least supported them. They're wrong. OPLAN and DeSoto are separate operations. But North Vietnam doesn't know that. They decide to respond. August 2nd, 1964. 3:30 p.m. 3 North Vietnamese torpedo boats approach USS Maddox. They attack. Maddox opens fire. Over 280 shells. Scores 1 direct hit on a torpedo boat. Aircraft from the carrier Ticonderoga join the fight. Strafe the patrol boats with machine guns and rockets. The engagement lasts 20 minutes. North Vietnamese boats limp back to port. 1 badly damaged. 4 sailors dead. 6 wounded. Maddox escapes unscathed. 1 bullet hole in the superstructure. This attack is real, is less than #. 5# is greater than. North Vietnam confirms it happened. They admit their patrol boats attacked Maddox in response to coastal raids. Johnson's advisors urge restraint. It was a minor incident. Maddox wasn't seriously damaged. No Americans hurt. Johnson orders Maddox to resume patrols. This time with another destroyer, USS Turner Joy. Show the North Vietnamese they can't intimidate us. 2 days later, something happens. Or doesn't happen. Depending on who you believe. August 4th, 1964. Maddox and Turner Joy return to the Gulf of Tonkin. Night falls. Weather is terrible. Storms, rough seas, poor visibility. 9:34 p.m. Maddox's radar picks up what might be enemy contacts. Both ships go to battle stations. For the next 2 hours, they fire at radar contacts. Over 300 shells. Torpedoes reported in the water. Sonar operators report hearing as many as 25 torpedoes. Here's the problem. North Vietnam has 9 operational patrol boats in the area. Each boat carries 2 torpedoes. That's a maximum of 18 torpedoes. The math doesn't work. Captain John Herrick, commander of the Maddox, starts having doubts. Sends a message the next morning. Review of action makes many reported contacts, and torpedoes fired appear doubtful. Freak weather effects on radar and overeager sonarmen may have accounted for many reports. No actual visual sightings is less than #. 5# is greater than. Years later, analysis will show the radar contacts were probably weather anomalies. The sonar was picking up the ship's own propellers. Stressed crews seeing things that weren't there. Poor visibility, rough seas, young sailors expecting an attack. Most likely, no attack happened. But Johnson doesn't wait for confirmation. August 5th, he orders retaliatory airstrikes against North Vietnam. 64 sorties. Hit torpedo boat bases and oil storage facilities. 2 American planes shot down. Then he goes to Congress. August 10th, the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution is presented. Defense Secretary McNamara testifies. He describes unprovoked attacks on American destroyers in international waters. He shows maps, provides details, expresses outrage. He doesn't mention Oplan 34 Alpha covert raids. Doesn't mention Maddox was on intelligence-gathering mission. Doesn't mention Captain Herrick's doubts about the second attack. The resolution passes. House of Representatives, 416-0. Senate, 88-2. Only 2 senators vote against it. Wayne Morse of Oregon and Ernest Gruening of Alaska. Both predict disaster. Morse says, "I believe that history will record that we have made a great mistake." He's right. The resolution gives Johnson authority to use military force in Southeast Asia without declaring war. It's essentially a blank check is less than #, 5# is greater than. November 1964. Johnson wins election in a landslide. Campaigns as the peace candidate. Promises not to send American boys 9 or 10,000 miles away from home to do what Asian boys ought to be doing for themselves. Within a year, he'll have 184,000 American troops in Vietnam. The foundation of America's war in Vietnam is built on a naval battle that never happened. A lie told to Congress. A lie told to the American people. A lie that will cost 58,000 American lives. And over 3 million Vietnamese lives. February 7th, 1965. 2 AIM. Camp Holloway near Pleiku. Mortars start falling. 8 Americans dead, 126 wounded. National Security Advisor McGeorge Bundy rushes to the scene. Blood on the tarmac, twisted metal where aircraft used to be. He cables President Johnson. Time for half measures is over. 12 hours later, American jets hit North Vietnamese targets. Operation Flaming Dart. March 2nd, Johnson authorizes Operation Rolling Thunder. Sustained bombing campaign against North Vietnam. Over 643,000 tons of bombs will be dropped over 3 years. More than the entire Pacific Theater in World War II. It won't work. But American air bases need protection. ARVN troops aren't reliable enough. March 8th, 1965. 3,500 US Marines land at Da Nang is less than #. 5# is greater than. First official American combat troops in Vietnam. General Westmoreland immediately realizes not enough. He asks for more. April, 20,000 approved. June, 40,000 additional. July, another 100,000. Mission creep in real time. By end of 65, 184,000 troops. 66, 385,000. 67, 485,000. Nearly 500,000 American soldiers. And Westmoreland has a plan. Brilliant on paper. Catastrophically flawed in practice. General William Westmoreland has a strategy. Attrition. Kill more than they can replace. Eventually collapse. The math. North Vietnam population 20 million. 200,000 reach draft age annually. kill more than 200,000 per year, reach crossover point. After that, victory, inevitable. McNamara loves this. Quantifiable, measurable, predictable. Search and destroy. Find enemy forces, call in overwhelming firepower, destroy, move on, repeat. The metric? Body count. 3 catastrophic problems. Problem 1. Enemy controls when and where they fight. Attack when advantage, withdraw when not. Control tempo. Enemy initiated 75 to 80% of firefights. Americans walk into ambushes 3/4 of the time is less than #. 5# is greater than. Problem 2. Body counts are lies. No way to verify kills. Officers inflate numbers for careers. Rule becomes, if it's dead and Vietnamese, it's VC. McNamara builds charts on fabricated numbers. Problem 3. North Vietnam doesn't care about losses. Le Duan says plainly, question is how we can fight protracted war. We will absorb whatever casualties necessary. Westmoreland assumes both sides value life equally. They don't. And one more problem. Can't hold territory. Sweep area, kill enemy, leave. Not enough troops to garrison villages. VC, come back. We had to destroy the village in order to save it. That quote becomes war's epitaph. The M16 rifle. Revolutionary. One problem. It jams. Soldiers dying because rifles won't fire. Marine James Litch. Left with 72 men, came back with 19. Our own rifle killed most of us. Why? Army switched to cheaper gunpowder. Leaves more residue. No cleaning kits issued, told rifle is self-cleaning. Lie. One Marine writes, every dead found with rifle torn down, trying to fix it. Congress investigates 67. Army knew about problems. Finally, issue cleaning kits, modify rifle. But hundreds, maybe thousands died. Microcosm of entire war. Overconfidence, cost-cutting, lies. Paid with soldiers' blood. November 14, 65 is less than #. 5# is greater than. Ia Drang Valley. LTC Halmore, 450 men, land at LZ X-ray. Within hour, in hell. 3 NVA regiments, over 2,000 men, waiting. Open fire from 3 sides. More calls in everything. Artillery, gunships, jets, napalm, B-52s. Ground shakes like earthquake. 3 days fighting. Hand to hand in elephant grass. NVA climbing over bodies. Wounded using dead as shields. November 16, NVA withdraw to Cambodia. Battle over. American losses: 305 killed, over 500 wounded. NVA losses: MACV claims 3,500 killed. Impossible to verify with carpet bombing. Real number probably much lower. Westmoreland declares victory. Kill ratio 12-1. American firepower works. Except NVA achieved objective. Tested tactics, learned, survived, withdrew at leisure. GIAP learns. Get close, hit hard, withdraw before bombs. Real lesson. NVA can absorb horrific casualties and keep fighting. Americans can drop endless bombs and not control ground. Stalemate from day one. Crossover point? Doesn't exist. Viet Cong are not conventional army. They fight differently. Tunnel systems. Cu Chi. Over 250 kilometers, 3 stories deep. Underground cities. Americans sweep area, declare clear, get attacked from behind. Enemy literally beneath feet is less than Hashone. 5 is greater than. Tunnel rats. Small soldiers crawl into tunnels with pistols and flashlights. Terrifying combat, pitch black, claustrophobic, booby traps everywhere. Booby traps. Punji stakes. Sharpened bamboo coated with feces. Whip traps, grenade traps, mines made from unexploded American bombs. 25% American casualties from mines and booby traps. Every step could be last. Perfect ambushes. Study patrol patterns, hit from multiple sides, 15-minute firefights. Too short for air support. Average firefight duration, 15 to 20 minutes. By time jets arrive, VC gone. Using civilians as cover. Central problem. How tell friend from enemy when enemy looks like everyone else? Marine Philip Caputo. Enemy was unknown, everywhere, could be anyone. Creates paranoia, leads to violence against civilians, creates more resentment, creates more VC recruits. Vicious cycle. Average American soldier. 19 years old, working class. College kids get deferments, rich kids get exemptions, poor kids get drafted. 1-year tour, 365 days countdown. Welcome to hell. Typical patrol. Sea rations, breakfast, gear up, 45 kilograms. Walk through triple canopy jungle or rice paddies or elephant grass. 95 degrees, 90% humidity. Every step could trigger mine. Every shadow could hide enemy. Point man has most dangerous job is less than #0. 5 is greater than he trips booby trap, walks into ambush. Life expectancy measured in days. Walk for hours searching for enemy who probably isn't there. Or, if is, watching. Waiting to decide whether to attack. Maybe firefight, 15 minutes chaos and terror, then silence. How many killed? Nobody knows. Lieutenant needs body count. Guess and double it. Or find nothing. Walk in circles 6 days, accomplish nothing, return to base. The environment. Leeches, mosquitoes, malaria, fire ants, snakes, centipedes. Immersion foot, jungle rot, heat exhaustion, dysentery. And the fear. Constant, grinding fear. What are you fighting for? By 66, 67, soldiers asking, stop communism? Villagers don't care. Protect democracy? Government is corrupt dictatorship. Why here? Honest answer. Keep buddies alive, survive 365 days. That's it. No grand strategy, just survival. Marine Caputo. Went with confidence nation was invincible, left knowing it wasn't. Pattern develops. Village takes fire, artillery called, village destroyed, all counted as enemy, KIA. Free fire zones. Anyone there automatically, VC, shoot on sight. Zippo raids. Burn villages with cigarette lighters. Vietnamese civilians fear both sides. Body count metric encourages killing. Dead Vietnamese equals success. William Earhart. We were there to kill Vietnamese. Everything makes sense is less than Hajong. 5 hash is greater than. Reports of atrocities reach Pentagon by 67. Torture, rape, mutilation, civilians shot for sport. Most ignored or covered up. Worst yet to come. My Lie. March 16, 68. By late 67, 485,000 troops, 16,000 US dead, 220,000 enemy dead, claimed. Kill ratio looks great. But we're not winning. VC still control countryside, NVA infiltration continues. Home support collapsing. 61% support 65, 35% 67. Anti-war movement growing. Westmoreland. Light at end of tunnel, November 67. In 8 weeks, VC prove him catastrophically wrong. Tet offensive coming. Late 67, Hanoi. North Vietnamese leadership divided. Ho Chi Minh and Giap favor protracted war. Grind down American will over years. Le Duan and Southern revolutionaries want knockout blow. One massive offensive sparks uprising, destroys Saigon government, forces America to abandon war. Hawks win. Why? Protracted war getting expensive. American bombing takes toll, infrastructure destroyed, casualties mounting. Le Duan's plan. Attack every major city simultaneously. Show nowhere is safe, spark uprising. Theory. South Vietnamese civilians waiting for signal to overthrow government. Once see VC liberating cities, join revolution, ARVN defects. Saigon collapses is less than Hashon. 5# is greater than massive gamble. Giap warns. Tried general offensive against French in 51, failed, 20,000 dead. Le Douane overrules. Ho too weak to resist. Offensive, approved. Launched during Tet. Vietnamese New Year, traditional ceasefire. Complete surprise. Weapons smuggled into cities. VC infiltrate, disguised as peasants. Targets. Every provincial capital, major cities, American bases, even US Embassy Saigon. 80,000 VC and NVA troops. Westmoreland misreads signals. Thinks main attack will be Khe Sanh, remote marine base. January 68, NVA besiege it. He's wrong. Khe Sanh is diversion. Real target is cities. Works perfectly. January 29, Tet begins. Ceasefire announced. Half ARVN on leave. January 33 AM. 80,000 attack simultaneously. For weeks, VC enter cities. Disguised as peasants, merchants, students, mourners. Women hide grenades in flower baskets. Men smuggle rifles in coffins. Saigon alone, 4,000 VC infiltrate. Weapons smuggled separately. Hidden in vegetable carts, buried in cemeteries, stashed in pagodas. January 30, 3 AM. 80,000 troops attack simultaneously. 5 of 6 major cities, 36 of 44 provincial capitals, 64 district capitals, 50 hamlets. Largest coordinated operation of entire war. Saigon, 19 VC sapper teams hit key targets, is less than Hashon. 0# is greater than Presidential Palace, radio station, ARVN headquarters, Tan Son Nhut Air Base. Most shockingly, US Embassy. 3:10 AM. 19 VC blowhole in wall, storm compound. 6-hour battle in courtyard, couldn't breach main building. 9:45 AM, all 19 VC dead, 5 Americans killed. Militarily, US victory. Psychologically, devastating. TV cameras film everything. Headline: Enemy seizes US Embassy. Walter Cronkite. What the hell is going on? Thought we were winning. Millions thinking same thing. Westmoreland said winning, light at tunnel's end. Now, enemy attacks every city simultaneously? Most attacks fail within hours, days. Except one city. Hugh. (3:10 AM, January 31). 19 VC commandos blowhole in US Embassy wall. 6-hour battle in courtyard. Couldn't breach main building doors. 9:45 AM, all 19 VC dead, 5 Americans killed. Militarily, US victory. Psychologically, devastating. TV cameras film everything. Eddie Adams photo. Saigon Street, Police Chief Nguyen Ngoc Loan executes captured VC officer in head, point blank. Adams catches exact moment of impact. Pulitzer Prize. Context lost. Executed man was death squad leader who murdered Colonel's family, 8 people, including 6 children. But image of casual execution becomes symbol of war's brutality. Saigon, just one city. In Hue, 10,000 NVA seized ancient imperial city, raised VC flag over citadel is less than Hashone. 5 hash is greater than not leaving. Battle for Hue becomes longest, bloodiest urban combat of entire war. 26 days. Hue is not just another city. Ancient imperial capital, citadel fortress, imperial palace, UNESCO World Heritage Site. Vietnam's cultural heart, population 140,000. January 31 becomes battlefield. 3 a.m. 10,000 NVA and VC infiltrate. Seize citadel, capture city, overrun ARVN headquarters. By dawn, NVA flag over citadel. Then, killing begins. Communists have lists. Government officials, ARVN officers, police, teachers, Catholic priests. Anyone connected to Saigon regime. House to house, drag people away. Some shot immediately, others to execution sites. Shallow graves, people clubbed, shot, buried alive. Over next 3 weeks, nearly 3,000 civilians executed. American forces don't know Hue has fallen. Alpha Company, 150 Marines, ordered to relieve ARVN in Citadel. Don't know city has fallen. Drive into hell. Urban combat. Multi-story buildings, narrow streets, civilians everywhere, NVA well-trained regulars. Rules of engagement loosen. Tanks, jets, naval gunfire, blast ancient city. Sergeant Alfredo Gonzalez assaults machine gun positions, hit multiple times, dies, rescuing wounded. Medal of Honor posthumous. February 10, Southern Hue secured. Citadel assault begins. Imperial Palace becomes battlefield, is less than has shown. 0 hash is greater than. Artillery destroys ancient walls. Machine guns rip carved doors. February 24. ARVN Storm Palace. NVA flag comes down. Battle over. 24 days total. Casualties. Us. 142 Marines killed. 857 wounded. ARV-N 384 killed, 1,800 wounded. NVA, VC 5,000 plus killed. Civilians 5,800 dead or missing. 3,000 executed by communists, hundreds from US ARVN firepower. City destroyed. 10,000 buildings damaged or demolished. Imperial Palace rubble. Ancient temples gone. University leveled. 80% uninhabitable. 116,000 refugees out of 140,000 population. Quote, "We had to destroy the city to save it." By March 68, Tet offensive over. Militarily, unqualified American victory. All attacks repulsed, 37,000 VC killed, VC infrastructure shattered, no general uprising. VC ceased to be main fighting force, too depleted. NVA takes over. GIAP admits costly failure. But politically, America lost the war. Public shocked. Westmoreland said winning, then enemy attacks 100-plus cities simultaneously. February 27. Walter Cronkite editorial. Just returned from Vietnam, saw destruction, talked to soldiers, watched Hugh burn. Looks into camera. It seems now more certain than ever that bloody experience of Vietnam is to end in stalemate, is less than has shown. 5 hash is greater than. To say we are mired in stalemate seems only realistic yet unsatisfactory conclusion. Johnson watches from White House, turns to aide. If I've lost Cronkite, I've lost Middle America. He's right. March. 68 polls. Only 26% approve Johnson's handling, down from 48% 3 months earlier. Westmoreland asks for 206,000 more troops. Johnson's new Defense Secretary Clark Clifford reviews request, asks uncomfortable questions. How long? What's endgame? How many more troops after these? Can we actually win? Pentagon can't give satisfactory answers. March 31, Johnson addresses nation. Announces limiting bombing, offering negotiation. Then drops bombshell. I shall not seek, and I will not accept, the nomination of my party for another term as your president. War destroyed his presidency. Tet was military victory, but shattered American will to continue fighting. In democracy, public opinion matters more than kill ratios. North Vietnamese lost the battle, but they won the war. Vietnam War was never just America versus Vietnam. Washington desperately wanted international coalition, defending freedom. Not one superpower, bullying small country. SEATO, Southeast Asia Treaty Organization, was supposed to be NATO for Asia. 8 members. When America invoked SEATO to justify Vietnam intervention, most members said no. Britain is less than #0. 5 hash is greater than politely declined, dealing with own colonial withdrawals. France. Absolutely not. Just lost war there. De Gaulle calls it neo-colonialism doomed to fail. Pakistan. Nope, more worried about India. New Zealand sends fewer than 600 troops. Token support. Philippines sent over 10,000 troops, mostly medical and engineering, non-combat support. Thailand hosted American air bases, sent nearly 12,000 troops, but primary interest protecting own border from insurgency. Taiwan offered troops. Johnson said no, didn't want to provoke China. Real combat allies who sent significant fighting forces and took heavy casualties. Just 3. South Korea, Australia, and army that didn't officially exist, the Montagnards. America's grand international coalition turned out to be United States, one close ally, one Cold War client state, and CIA-funded tribal militia. Not quite UN army that fought in Korea. Australia entered Vietnam for complicated reasons. Yes, believed in stopping communist expansion, but mostly wanted to keep America engaged in Southeast Asia. Australian planners feared if America pulled out, communist China would dominate. So, they sent troops as insurance. Peak deployment, 7,500 Australians. Over 61,000 served 62 to 72. 521 killed, over 3,000 wounded. But Australians fought differently. Learned from Malaya in 50s, fighting communist insurgents in jungle is less than Hashone. Zero hash is greater than developed effective counterinsurgency tactics. Small patrols, 5 or 6 men, moving silently for days. Gathering intelligence, ambushing supply lines, avoiding big battles. Emphasized reconnaissance over firepower, hearts and minds over body counts, long-term presence over search and destroy. American officers found them frustratingly cautious. Too slow, not aggressive enough. Where's your body count? Australians didn't care, trying to control territory and win local support. And in Phuoc Tuy province, where Australians operated, it worked. Then, August 1866. Battle of Long Tan. D Company, 6th Battalion RAR, 108 men on patrol near Long Tan. Walk into ambush. Except not ambush, prepared assault. VC 275th Regiment and NVA elements, over 2,000 troops. Australians outnumbered 18 to 1. Major Harry Smith orders defensive positions, calls artillery. 3 hours, 108 Australians hold off wave after wave attacks. Running out of ammunition, calling resupply by helicopter, artillery landing danger close. Late afternoon, ammunition critically low, some sections down to last magazine. Then, armoured personnel carriers from Alpha Company crash through rubber trees, heavy machine guns blazing, break enemy attack. By nightfall, over. Australian casualties. 18 killed, 24 wounded. Enemy casualties. Over 245 confirmed killed, possibly many more is less than Hashone. 5 hash is greater than. Battle of Long Tan becomes legendary in Australia. But unlike American battles, Australians follow up. They don't just count bodies and leave. They stay, patrol area, build relationships with villages, provide security, medical care, development aid. In Phuoc Tuy, Viet Cong influence declined significantly. Not because of body counts, because Australians win enough local support that villagers stop helping VC. Strategy Americans should have used, but didn't. South Korea sent second largest foreign contingent. Over 300,000 ROK troops served 65 to 73. Peak deployment 50,000 troops. Capital Tiger Division, 9th White Horse Division, 2nd Marine Blue Dragon Brigade. Fierce, disciplined, effective, and absolutely brutal. Why did South Korea send so many troops? Part: genuine anti-communist commitment. They'd fought North Korea and China just 15 years earlier. But mostly transactional. President Park Chung-hee needed American support. Economic aid, military equipment, legitimacy. Made deal. South Korea sends troops. America pays for it generously. US gave South Korea over $1 billion in direct payments, plus military aid, preferential trade deals, guaranteed security commitments. Korean soldiers paid much less than Americans. Park's government pocketed difference. Vietnam War became significant revenue source for South Korea's economic development is less than Hashon. 5 hash is greater than, but ROK troops earned their pay. They were tough. Many Korean War veterans, grown up in poverty, survived Japanese occupation, endured brutal war. Vietnam was rough, but not worse than what they'd survived. Tactics: aggressive. When took area, cleared thoroughly, no half measures. Viet Cong learned to avoid ROK-controlled areas. Korean troops had reputation for not taking prisoners, responding to attacks by leveling entire villages. VC documents showed orders to avoid engaging Korean forces if possible. The Koreans are too fanatical. ROK casualties significantly lower than American despite similar combat. 5,099 killed over 8 years compared to 58,000 Americans. Part tactical competence, part caution, part they fought with ruthlessness that made enemy avoid them. But ruthlessness came with cost. Multiple massacres of Vietnamese civilians by ROK forces documented. Phong Ni, Phong Nhat, Ha Mai Bin Hoa. Worst was Bin Hoa massacre, December 66. After convoy ambushed, ROK Marines swept through village. Killed between 380 and 430 civilians, mostly women, children, elderly. For decades, South Korean government denied atrocities, classified records, refused acknowledgement or compensation. Only recent years have some Korean veterans begun speaking out, admitting what happened, expressing remorse. ROK contribution complicated. Militarily effective, helped defend South Vietnam, soldiers fought bravely is less than Hashon. 0 hash is greater than and committed war crimes. Like every force in this war, line between combatant and civilian, between military necessity and atrocity, got blurred. Central highlands of Vietnam. Mountains, jungle, remote villages. Montagnard territory. Montagnard is French for mountain people. Actually dozens of different ethnic groups. Jarai, Rade, Barna, Koho, Sedang. Each with own language, customs, traditions. Total population maybe 1 million spread across highlands. They're not Vietnamese, or don't consider themselves Vietnamese. For centuries, marginalized by lowland Vietnamese, considered primitive, backwards. Vietnamese call them moi, savages. When American Special Forces arrived early 60s, looking for local allies, Montagnards receptive. Enemy of my enemy is friend. CIA and U.S. Army Special Forces developed CIDG program, Civilian Irregular Defense Group. Recruit Montagnards, train them, arm them, use them to defend remote areas and gather intelligence. By 63, over 12,000 trained and armed. By 65, over 40,000. Green Beret A-teams, 12-man units, lived in remote highland camps alongside Montagnard fighters. Trained them in weapons, tactics, patrolling, ate together, fought together, bled together. Many Green Berets learned Montagnard languages, participated in ceremonies, some married Montagnard women. Bond formed. Montagnards were excellent fighters, is less than Hashone. 0 hash is greater than new. Terrain intimately, moved silently through jungle, tough, brave, loyal. Personal stake, protecting villages from both VC and Saigon government. Key battles. Camp Play Me, October 65. 12 Green Berets plus 349 Montagnards hold off thousands of NVA for 6 days. Camp Lang Vei, February 68 during Tet. NVA attacks with T-54 tanks, first armour use in war. Camp Falls, only 14 of 24 Green Berets escape, most Montagnards killed or captured. Betrayals. September 64, Montagnards in 5 camps mutiny, kill South Vietnamese officers, declare independence, demand autonomy. Green Berets negotiate settlement, promises made, never kept. 1973, US withdraws, Montagnards abandoned. Post-75, Communist government views them as American collaborators. Re-education camps, land seized, culture suppressed. Thousands died, thousands fled to jungle, some fought until 90s. Many Green Berets spent decades helping Montagnard refugees escape. Forgotten tragedy. Trusted America, fought alongside American soldiers, left behind. One of war's forgotten tragedies. People who trusted America, left behind when convenient. This wasn't just America versus Vietnam. Proxy war between superpowers. Soviet Union and China poured enormous resources into North Vietnam, not because they loved Ho Chi Minh, because bleeding America in Southeast Asia served strategic interests is less than Hashone. 5 hash is greater than the numbers. Between 65 and 73, Soviet Union provided North Vietnam estimated $2 billion in military aid. About 18 billion in today's money. China provided even more, over $3 billion. Plus, something more valuable than money, troops. Over 320,000 Chinese soldiers served in North Vietnam between 65 and 68. 320,000. They didn't fight in South Vietnam. That would risk direct confrontation with America, but served as engineering troops, anti-aircraft units, railroad repair crews, logistics support. Freed up North Vietnamese troops to go south and fight. Over 1,100 Chinese soldiers died in Vietnam, mostly from American bombing. Korea all over again. Chinese troops fighting Americans without officially being at war. Soviets didn't send troops, sent weapons. MiG fighters, MiG-17s, MiG-21s. Flown by North Vietnamese pilots trained in Soviet Union. Surface-to-air missiles, SA-2 guideline. Soviet advisors operated early systems until North Vietnamese crews trained. SAMs changed air war. Before 65, American pilots flew with near impunity. After 65, every mission risked getting shot down. Over 900 American aircraft lost to SAMs during war. Soviets also provided radar systems, anti-aircraft artillery, tanks, trucks, AK-47s by hundreds of thousands, ammunition. Fuel is less than Hashon. 5 hash is greater than. Why? Not charity. Every American plane shot down over Vietnam was one less threatening Soviet territory. Every American soldier bogged down in jungle was one less in Europe. Every billion spent on Vietnam was 1 billion not spent on nuclear weapons or NATO. Vietnam draining American resources, dividing American society, damaging American credibility worldwide. For Soviets, supporting North Vietnam was geopolitical bargain of century. China's motivations more complicated. Feared American bases on border, wanted war to continue, keep America tied down, but didn't want North Vietnam too dependent on Soviet Union. Sino-Soviet split turned former allies into rivals by 60s. North Vietnam played Soviets and Chinese against each other for maximum aid. Manipulated both to maximize support. But here's crucial difference between two sides. For America, Vietnam was one of many global commitments. Important, but not existential, could leave when domestic support collapsed. For North Vietnam, this was everything. National survival, independence, unification. They would absorb any casualties, endure any hardship, fight as long as it took. Soviets and Chinese provided weapons, but North Vietnam provided will. And will mattered more than weapons. Most Americans have never heard of the war in Laos. That's by design. From 1964 to 1973, the United States dropped 2.75 million tons of bombs on Laos is less than Hashon. 0 hash is greater than more than all the bombs dropped on Germany and Japan combined in World War II. 260 million cluster bomblets. 80 million didn't explode. They're still there. Still killing people. Laos became the most heavily bombed country per capita in human history. And almost nobody knew it was happening. Here's why. The 1962 Geneva Accords declared Laos a neutral country. All foreign military forces were supposed to withdraw. The United States signed this agreement, then immediately violated it. Because Laos wasn't neutral. The eastern part of the country, bordering Vietnam, was controlled by the communist Pathet Lao. And more importantly, the Ho Chi Minh Trail ran through it. The trail wasn't one road. It was a network of paths, roads, rivers, trails stretching through the Laotian and Cambodian jungles. Thousands of miles. Constantly shifting, evolving, expanding. This was North Vietnam's lifeline to the south. Troops, weapons, supplies, everything moved down the trail. Cut the trail, win the war. That was the theory. But there was a problem. Laos was supposed to be neutral. America couldn't officially send troops there. Congress didn't authorize it. The Geneva Accords forbade it. So the CIA did it instead. They recruited a secret army. Not American soldiers. Hmong tribesmen. The Hmong are an ethnic minority. Living in the mountains of northern Laos is less than #0. 5# is greater than tough, independent people who'd been oppressed by the lowland Lao for generations. When the communists threatened their autonomy, they were ready to fight. Enter the CIA. The architect was a legendary operative named Bill Lair. He started small in 1961, recruiting Hmong villagers, training them in guerrilla warfare, supplying them with weapons. The leader of the Hmong forces was Vang Pao, a former Royal Lao Army Major General. Charismatic, ruthless, brilliant tactician. By 1965, Vang Pao commanded 39,000 Hmong fighters. They weren't on any official US military payroll. The CIA funded them through classified budgets hidden in other programs. Most of Congress didn't know they existed. The Hmong fought the Pathet, Lao and North Vietnamese forces in northern Laos, defended their villages, conducted raids, rescued, downed American pilots, gathered intelligence on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. They were supported by Air America. Air America was supposedly a civilian airline. Actually, it was owned and operated by the CIA. Their pilots, mostly veterans, ex-military, adventurers, flew everything. Supply drops to remote Hmong villages, medical evacuations, weapons, shipments, covert insertions of reconnaissance teams, and allegedly opium. Yes, opium. The Hmong had grown opium for generations. It was their cash crop. When the CIA recruited them, they needed to maintain the opium trade to keep the Hmong economy functioning is less than Hashon. 5# is greater than. Did Air America transport opium? Officially, no. Unofficially, multiple pilots later admitted they did. They were told it was medical supplies or didn't ask questions. Some of that opium ended up being refined into heroin. Some of that heroin ended up in South Vietnam, where American soldiers bought it. The CIA's secret war inadvertently fueled the heroin epidemic among US troops. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Back to the bombing. Operation Barrel Roll began in December 1964. US airstrikes in northern Laos, supporting the Hmong Army and the Royal Lao government forces. Operation Steel Tiger started in April 1965, bombing the Ho Chi Minh Trail in southern Laos. Operation Tiger Hound followed in December 65. Even more intensive bombing of the trail. Every day, dozens of American planes flew bombing missions over Laos. B-52s, carpet bombing suspected truck parks. 4 Phantoms hitting bridges. A-1s strafing convoys. One mission every 8 minutes. 24 hours a day. For 9 years. The most intensive aerial bombardment in history. But it was all secret. The bombing missions were classified. Reporters weren't allowed in Laos. The CIA's Hmong army didn't officially exist. Air America was just a civilian cargo airline. When senators asked about Laos, they were told, "We're complying with the Geneva Accords," is less than Hashon. Zero hash is greater than no American ground troops in Laos. Technically true. American soldiers didn't fight there. Just American pilots dropping millions of tons of bombs, and CIA officers directing a secret army, and American forward air controllers marking targets. But no official ground troops. The lying became routine. In 1969, Senator Stuart Symington held hearings about Laos. CIA officials testified under oath. They admitted some limited operations. They downplayed the bombing. They denied the scale of involvement. Everything they said was a lie. The truth was worse than anyone imagined. The Plain of Jars, a plateau in northern Laos, ancient archaeological site with mysterious stone jars dating back thousands of years. By the late 1960s, it's a free-fire zone. Everything that moves gets bombed. Hmong and Pathet Lao forces fight for control. The towns change hands repeatedly. Each time, B-52s carpet bomb the area. Civilians flee into caves. They live underground for years, coming out only at night to plant rice. Fred Branfman, an American aid worker, interviews survivors. Their stories are horrifying. One woman describes hiding in a cave with her children while bombs fell for hours. The bombs fell like rain. When she emerged, her village was gone. Just craters. Another man says, "We lived in the holes like animals. We could not grow rice because the plains destroyed everything," is less than Hashon. Zero hash is greater than many children died from hunger. The Plain of Jars becomes the most bombed place per square mile in human history. And the bombing doesn't stop the trail. The North Vietnamese adapt. They move supplies at night. They hide trucks under jungle canopy during the day. They build elaborate camouflage. They construct underground storage facilities. They even develop a sophisticated air defense network in Laos. SAM missiles, anti-aircraft guns, early warning radar. American planes start getting shot down over Laos too. Over 580 American aircraft are lost over Laos during the war. Hundreds of pilots killed or captured. But the real casualties are Laotian. About 50,000 Hmong fighters die during the war, out of a total Hmong population of maybe 300,000. That's 1 in 6. Total Laotian deaths from the war? Estimates range from 200,000 to 300,000. In a country with a population of only 3 million. 10% of the entire population. And when America withdraws in 1973, the Hmong are abandoned. The communist Pathet Lao, backed by North Vietnam, sweep through the country. In 1975, they take power. Vang Pao, and his closest allies flee to Thailand, then to America. Eventually, over 200,000 Hmong refugees resettle in the United States. Those who stay face persecution. Re-education camps is less than #0. 5# is greater than executions. Some Hmong groups fight guerrilla resistance for decades. And those cluster bombs? 80 million unexploded bomblets scattered across Laos. They look like tennis balls. Children find them, pick them up, they explode. Since 1975, over 20,000 Laotians have been killed or injured by unexploded ordnance. Most of them children and farmers. The bombing stopped 50 years ago. People are still dying from it. Laos holds a grim world record. The most heavily bombed country per capita in history. For a war most Americans never knew existed. Cambodia tried to stay neutral. It didn't work. Prince Norodom Sihanouk ruled Cambodia since 1941. A skilled politician, he played all sides. Took aid from America, China, the Soviet Union, North Vietnam, kept Cambodia out of the war. Mostly. The problem was geography. Cambodia's eastern border with Vietnam was wild jungle. Perfect for the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Perfect for North Vietnamese base camps. By the late 1960s, 40,000 North Vietnamese troops operated inside Cambodia. Sihanouk knew they were there. He couldn't stop them, so he pretended not to notice. America noticed. And in March 1969, President Nixon authorized Operation Menu, secret bombing of North Vietnamese sanctuaries in Cambodia. Completely secret. Not secret from the North Vietnamese is less than #0. 5# is greater than they knew they were being bombed. Secret from the American people. Secret from Congress. Secret from the American military's own official records. Nixon and his national security advisor, Henry Kissinger, ordered the Pentagon to falsify bombing reports. Pilots filed fake flight plans. Said they were bombing South Vietnam. Actually, they were hitting targets in Cambodia. For 14 months, this continued. Over 100,000 tons of bombs dropped on Cambodia in secret. Then, in March 1970, everything changed. While Sihanouk is travelling abroad, his own government overthrows him. General Lon Nol, pro-American, anti-communist, seizes power. Did the CIA help? They deny it. But they'd been cultivating Lon Nol for years. They certainly approved. Lon Nol immediately demands North Vietnamese forces leave Cambodia. He gives them 72 hours. The North Vietnamese ignore him. So Lon Nol invites American and South Vietnamese forces to attack the communist sanctuaries. Nixon doesn't need to be asked twice. April 30th, 1970. Nixon addresses the nation. America and South Vietnam are invading Cambodia to destroy enemy base camps and supplies, to protect American forces withdrawing from Vietnam. We will not be humiliated. We will not be defeated. This is not an invasion, he insists. It's defending American interests. 30,000 American troops and 50,000 ARVN troops pour across the border is less than Hashon. 5 hash is greater than. The results? Mixed. They capture supplies. Weapons, ammunition, rice. They destroy some base camps. But most North Vietnamese forces simply retreat deeper into Cambodia, or across the border into Laos. The sanctuaries reform within weeks. The American and ARVN forces withdraw after 2 months. Nixon had promised they wouldn't stay. They'd proved their point. But the damage was done. The invasion destabilizes Cambodia completely. Lon Nol's government controls the cities. The countryside descends into chaos. And it radicalizes Cambodian communists. The Khmer Rouge. They'd been a minor guerrilla movement, mostly hiding in the jungle. After the American invasion, their ranks explode. Peasants whose villages were destroyed by American bombing join the Khmer Rouge. Students angry about Lon Nol's coup join. Intellectuals opposed to foreign intervention join. By 1973, the Khmer Rouge control half of Cambodia. Meanwhile, America keeps bombing. Operation Freedom Deal. From January 1970 to August 1973, over 257,000 tons of bombs dropped on Cambodia. The bombing is supposed to support Lon Nol's government. Instead, it drives more people to the Khmer Rouge. A Finnish diplomat later estimates the bombing killed between 30,000 and 500,000 Cambodians. Mostly civilians. In August 1973, Congress finally forces Nixon to stop is less than #0. 5 hash is greater than no, more bombing anywhere in Indochina. The war is over. For Cambodia, the nightmare is just beginning. April 17th, 1975. 2 weeks before Saigon falls, the Khmer Rouge capture Phnom Penh, the Cambodian capital. At first, many Cambodians celebrate. The civil war is over. Peace at last. Then the evacuation begins. The Khmer Rouge, led by a former teacher named Pol Pot, order everyone out of the cities. Immediately. No exceptions. Phnom Penh has a population of 2.5 million. They're given hours to leave. Take only what you can carry. Hospitals are emptied. Patients on IV drips, post-surgery, dying, pushed into the streets. Many don't survive the evacuation. Why? Because Pol Pot has a vision. Return Cambodia to year 0. Erase all foreign influence. Eliminate capitalism, Buddhism, education, technology. Create a pure agrarian communist society. Everyone must become peasant farmers. The entire population is forced into the countryside, organized into collective farms. Forced labor from dawn to dusk. But it gets worse. The Khmer Rouge begin purging enemies of the revolution. Who are the enemies? Anyone educated. Teachers, doctors, engineers, lawyers. If you wore glasses, you were probably educated. That's enough to get you killed. Anyone who worked for the old government is less than #0. 5# is greater than police, soldiers, bureaucrats. Executed. Anyone with ties to foreigners. Spoke French or English. Executed. Buddhist monks. Religion is the opium of the masses. Temples destroyed. Monks forced to disrobe or killed. Ethnic minorities. Vietnamese, Chinese, Thai. Targeted for extermination. Families are separated. Children taken from parents. Indoctrinated to spy on their families. Encouraged to report counter-revolutionary thoughts. Food is controlled by the state. Rations are minimal. Millions starve. Tuol Sleng, S21. A high school in Phnom Penh converted into a torture and execution center. Over 14,000 people pass through S21. They're photographed, interrogated, tortured until they confess to crimes they didn't commit. Then they're executed. 7 survivors out of 14,000. Cheung Ek. The killing fields. Mass graves outside Phnom Penh where prisoners from S21 are executed. They're killed with farm tools to save bullets. Hit with hoes, axes, bamboo sticks. Thrown into pits. 89 mass graves at Cheung Ek alone. Nearly 9,000 bodies. This happens all over Cambodia. From 1975 to 1979, the Khmer Rouge kill approximately 2.8 million Cambodians. Out of a population of 8 million, 1 in 3. Some are executed is less than #0. 5# is greater than shot, bludgeoned, buried alive. Most die from starvation, disease, overwork. It's one of the worst genocides in human history. Proportionally worse than the Holocaust. How does it end? The Khmer Rouge make a fatal mistake. They attack Vietnam. Border raids, massacres of Vietnamese villages. Pol Pot fears Vietnam's influence. He wants to recover territory Cambodia lost centuries ago. Big mistake. December 25, 1978. Vietnam invades Cambodia. 150,000 troops. They sweep through the country in 2 weeks. January 7, 1979. Vietnamese forces capture Phnom Penh. The Khmer Rouge government collapses. The genocide ends. Vietnam installs a new government, the People's Republic of Kampuchea. They'll occupy Cambodia for the next decade. But here's the twisted irony. The United States condemns Vietnam's invasion, calls it aggression, supports UN resolutions against it. And America, along with China, supports the Khmer Rouge. Yes, you read that right. The Khmer Rouge retreat to the Thai border. They reorganize as a guerrilla force. And the United States provides them with diplomatic support and indirect aid. Why? Because Vietnam is aligned with the Soviet Union, and the enemy of our enemy is our friend, even if that friend committed genocide. Cold War logic, at its most grotesque, is less than #3. Zero hash is greater than, so let's review Cambodia. America secretly bombed it, then invaded it. The invasion destabilized the government, which led to civil war, which brought the Khmer Rouge to power, who killed 2.8 million people. Then, Vietnam stopped the genocide, and America condemned Vietnam and supported the genocidal Khmer Rouge. Cambodia's tragedy is the perfect symbol of everything wrong with the Vietnam War. Good intentions paving the road to hell. Unintended consequences spiraling out of control. Ideology trumping humanity. And abandoning people to their fate when it's politically convenient. The secret wars in Laos and Cambodia killed hundreds of thousands, destabilized 2 countries, created refugee crises, left unexploded bombs that kill to this day, and most Americans never knew they were happening. Because they were secret. November 5th, 1968. Richard Nixon wins the presidency. He campaigned on a promise. He has a secret plan to end the war. He's lying. There is no secret plan. But the American people are desperate to believe him. Nixon inherits a disaster. 536,000 American troops in Vietnam, 314 dead every week. Anti-war protests sweeping college campuses. The Democratic Party torn apart by the war. American credibility shattered by Tet. And a military strategy that clearly isn't working is less than his own. 5 hash is greater than, but Nixon can't just withdraw. That would look like defeat. America doesn't lose wars. Republican hawks would destroy him. So he needs something else. A way to get out without looking like we're getting out. Vietnamization. The idea: build up South Vietnamese forces so they can defend themselves. Gradually withdraw American troops. Eventually, the ARVN fights the war alone. America provides weapons, training, air support, money, but no ground troops. It's essentially what Kennedy tried in the early 1960s. And what failed? But Nixon brands it differently, makes it sound like a new strategy. The American people want to believe it'll work. His national security advisor, Henry Kissinger, has a different term for it. Decent interval. In private conversations, Kissinger is brutally honest. South Vietnam probably can't survive on its own. But if we can maintain them for a few years after American withdrawal, it won't look like our fault when they collapse. We've got to be in a position where, if it doesn't work, it will be the result of the other side. Translation: we need a scapegoat. But Nixon has another strategy too. One that's more his style. The madman theory. Nixon wants the North Vietnamese to think he's unstable, unpredictable, capable of anything. He tells his chief of staff, H.R. Haldeman, I want the North Vietnamese to believe I've reached the point where I might do anything to stop this war, is less than Hashon. 0 hash is greater than, we'll just slip the word to them that Nixon is obsessed about communism. We can't restrain him when he's angry, and he has his hand on the nuclear button. He thinks if Hanoi believes he might drop nuclear weapons, they'll negotiate. It doesn't work. The North Vietnamese have been fighting for 30 years. Against the Japanese, against the French, against the Americans. They've endured worse than Nixon can threaten. So, Nixon tries escalation instead. In March 1969, he begins secret bombing of Cambodia. As we discussed earlier, then, in April 1970, the invasion of Cambodia. These operations are supposed to show strength, demonstrate that America won't be pushed around, force North Vietnam to negotiate seriously. Instead, they trigger the largest anti-war protests in American history. And they reveal just how badly Vietnamization is failing. On paper, Vietnamization looks like progress. By 1972, ARVN forces number over 1 million soldiers. The United States has provided them with modern weapons, M16 rifles, M60 machine guns, artillery, helicopters, even tanks. Training programs expand. American advisors work with ARVN units at every level. And American troop levels drop from 536,000 in 1968 to 335,000 in 1970. To 156,000 in 1971 is less than #0. 5 hash is greater than. To 24,000 in 1972. Nixon can point to these numbers and say, "See, we're ending the war." But underneath, ARVN is rotting. The fundamental problems haven't changed. Corruption is endemic. Officers buy their positions. Supplies disappear into the black market. Soldiers' salaries are stolen by commanders. Morale is terrible. Many ARVN soldiers are fighting because they were conscripted, not because they believe in the cause. Their families live in poverty. The government they're defending is corrupt and unpopular. Desertion rates are astronomical. In 1971 alone, over 120,000 ARVN soldiers desert. That's roughly 1/10 of the entire army. Some units are excellent. The airborne divisions, the Marines, some Ranger battalions. They fight well and take heavy casualties. But most ARVN units avoid combat whenever possible. Their officers don't want to take risks that might get them killed. The soldiers don't want to die for a government they don't trust. And everyone knows that once the Americans leave, South Vietnam is doomed. The test comes in February 1971. Operation Lamson, 7/19. An ARVN invasion of Laos, designed to cut the Ho Chi Minh Trail. It's supposed to prove that Vietnamization works. That ARVN can conduct major operations without American ground troops. Only American air support is less than #. 5 hash is greater than. 17,000 ARVN troops cross into Laos. Their objective is the town of Chepon, a major supply hub on the trail. It's a disaster. 22,000 North Vietnamese troops are waiting. They've had weeks to prepare. Fortified positions, anti-aircraft batteries, tank support. The NVA hit the ARVN columns with coordinated attacks. T-54 tanks roll over ARVN positions. Artillery pounds the invasion route. ARVN units panic. Some break and run. Soldiers abandon equipment and flee back across the border. Helicopters trying to evacuate troops are swarmed by desperate ARVN soldiers clinging to the skids. Some fall to their deaths. The iconic image of Lamson 719, ARVN soldiers hanging from helicopter landing skids, being dragged through the air, falling into the jungle below. It's a preview of 1975. Out of 17,000 ARVN troops, 9,000 are killed, wounded, or captured. Over half. 108 American helicopters are shot down. Hundreds more damaged. The NVA air defenses in Laos are devastating. Nixon declares Lamson 719 a success. Chapone was temporarily occupied. Supplies were captured. The trail was disrupted. But everyone saw the truth on television. ARVN soldiers fleeing in panic, hanging from helicopters, abandoning equipment. This is the army that's supposed to defend South Vietnam after America leaves, is less than Hashone. 5# is greater than. Even worse, the trail reopens within weeks. The North Vietnamese repair the damage. Supplies flow south again. Vietnamization isn't working. But Nixon can't admit that. So he keeps withdrawing troops and declaring progress. Meanwhile, back in America, the war is tearing the country apart. April 30th, 1970. Nixon announces the invasion of Cambodia. The war is expanding, not ending. College campuses explode. Students across America go on strike. Over 400 universities shut down. Protests, sit-ins, building occupations. Then May 4th, 1970. Kent State University in Ohio. A student protest against the Cambodia invasion. The Ohio National Guard is called in. They're nervous, poorly trained, facing hostile crowds. Students throw rocks. Guardsmen fix bayonets. Then someone fires. 67 rounds in 13 seconds. 4 students dead. 9 wounded. Alison Krauss, 19. Jeffrey Miller, 20. Sandra Scheuer, 20. William Schroeder, 19. Schroeder wasn't even protesting. He was walking to class. The photograph of a young woman kneeling over Jeffrey Miller's body, screaming, arms outstretched, becomes the defining image of the anti-war movement. 10 days later, at Jackson State College in Mississippi, police open fire on a student dormitory. 2 black students killed. 12 wounded is less than Hashone. 5# is greater than. The country is in shock. Student strikes spread. Nearly 900 colleges and universities shut down. Over 4 million students participate. It's the only nationwide student strike in American history. Nixon's response? He doubles down. Appeals to the silent majority. The Americans who support the war effort, who don't protest, who trust their government. But that silent majority is shrinking. Polls show 60% of Americans now think the war was a mistake. The country is fractured, families divided, campuses in turmoil. Veterans returning home are spat on, called baby killers, told they fought for nothing. And in Vietnam, the soldiers still there are falling apart. By 1970, the American military in Vietnam is disintegrating. Not from enemy action. From within, the troops know the war is ending. They watch units rotate home. They see troop numbers dropping. They know Nixon is negotiating withdrawal. So the question every soldier asks: why should I be the last man to die in Vietnam? No one wants to take risks anymore. No one wants to be the final casualty of a lost war. Some units practice search and evade instead of search and destroy. They go out on patrol, find a safe spot, sit down, wait until it's time to return. Report negative contact. Nobody dies. Nobody asks questions. Officers who push too hard for aggressive action find themselves in danger is less than Hasson. 5 hash is greater than, not from the enemy, from their own men. Fragging. The term comes from fragmentation grenade. Soldiers would roll a grenade into an officer's tent at night, or toss one into their hooch, or plant explosives in their vehicle. The explosion kills or wounds the officer, and it's impossible to prove who did it. Could have been enemy action. Could have been an accident. Could have been anyone in the unit. Between 1969 and 1972, 788 fragging incidents are reported. 86 officers and NCOs killed. Over 700 wounded. And those are just the reported incidents. Many more go unreported. Accidents that weren't accidents. Firefights where an unpopular officer gets shot in the back. One company commander later recalls, "I would wake up at night and wonder if someone was about to throw a grenade in my hooch. Not the Viet Cong. My own men." The discipline breakdown goes beyond fragging. Drug use explodes. Marijuana has always been available in Vietnam. Easy to get, cheap. Soldiers smoke it to cope with stress, boredom, fear. But by 1970, heroin floods the bases. 95% pure. Incredibly cheap. Available everywhere. A Pentagon study finds that 35% of enlisted men in Vietnam try heroin. 20% become addicted. Soldiers smoke it mixed with tobacco is less than #0. 5 hash is greater than. They call it chasing the dragon. It's easier to hide than injecting. No needle marks. Entire units are high. Combat effectiveness drops to nothing. Some soldiers are so drugged they can barely function. One sergeant describes finding half his platoon nodding off during guard duty. They weren't drunk. They were on smack. And there was nothing I could do. Then there's racial tension. The civil rights movement back home has raised consciousness among black soldiers. They're fighting and dying at higher rates than white soldiers. For a country that treats them like second-class citizens. Why are we here? Many black soldiers start questioning the war. They see parallels between Vietnam and the black struggle at home, both fighting against oppression, both killed by the American government. Muhammad Ali's famous quote resonates. "No Viet Cong ever called me nigger." Race riots break out on bases. Black and white soldiers fighting each other. Sometimes officers lose control completely. The military's solution? Send the problem soldiers home early. Discharge them. Get rid of the troublemakers. Which means the military is collapsing just when Vietnamization requires a strong American presence to support ARVine. But some soldiers fight back in a different way. They organize. Vietnam Veterans Against the War. Founded in 1967, VVAW becomes a powerful voice against the war is less than Hashone. Zero hash is greater than. These aren't draft dodgers or hippies. These are combat veterans. Men who earned Purple Hearts and Bronze Stars. Men who fought and bled and watched their friends die. And they're saying the war is wrong. April 1971. Operation Dewey Canyon. 3. Over 1,000 veterans march on Washington. They camp on the National Mall. They testify before Congress about war crimes they witnessed or committed. They throw their medals onto the steps of the Capitol. One by one, veterans approach the Capitol steps, call out their names and units, and throw away their Purple Hearts, Bronze Stars, Silver Stars. This is for the people of Vietnam. This is for all the lies we were told. This is for my friends who died for nothing. One of the organizers is a young Navy veteran named John Kerry. He testifies before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. His words become famous. How do you ask a man to be the last man to die in Vietnam? How do you ask a man to be the last man to die for a mistake? It's the question no one in the government can answer. Three final blows land in quick succession. March 29, 1971. Lieutenant William Calley is convicted of murder for his role in the My Lai massacre. 3 years earlier, in March 1968, Calley led his platoon into the village of My Lai. They murdered between 347 and 504 unarmed civilians is less than #0. 5 is greater than women, children, elderly, babies. The army covered it up for over a year. Only came to light when a helicopter pilot who witnessed it, Hugh Thompson, reported what he saw. Calley is sentenced to life in prison. Then Nixon intervenes, moves him to house arrest. Calley serves less than 4 years under house arrest. Never spends a day in a military prison. The message is clear. You can massacre 500 civilians and barely be punished. June 13, 1971. The New York Times begins publishing the Pentagon Papers. 7,000 pages of classified documents detailing the history of US involvement in Vietnam. leaked by Daniel Ellsberg, a former Pentagon analyst who'd grown disillusioned with the war. The papers prove what many suspected. The government has been lying for years. They knew the war was unwinnable as early as 1965. They knew South Vietnam's government was corrupt and unstable. They knew the Gulf of Tonkin incident was exaggerated. They knew casualties would be far higher than they told the public. And they sent soldiers anyway. Nixon tries to stop publication. The Supreme Court rules against him. The papers keep coming. Public trust in government collapses further. If they lied about this, what else are they lying about? Then, 1972. Nixon faces re-election. He needs to show progress on Vietnam. Kissinger has been negotiating secretly with North Vietnam for years, is less than #0. 5# is greater than getting nowhere. But by October, they're close to a deal. Kissinger announces, "Peace is at hand." It isn't. South Vietnamese President Thieu refuses to sign. The agreement allows North Vietnamese troops to remain in South Vietnam. That's surrender, Thieu says. He's right. But Kissinger has already announced peace is coming. Nixon has been re-elected in a landslide, partly based on this promise. They need a deal. So, in December 1972, Nixon orders one final escalation. The Christmas bombing. Linebacker 2. 11 days of the most intensive bombing of the entire war. B-52 bombers hit Hanoi and Haiphong around the clock. Over 20,000 tons of bombs. More than 1,500 civilians killed. International condemnation. The bombing is supposed to force North Vietnam back to the negotiating table. Instead, it hardens their resolve. But both sides are exhausted. The Americans want out. The North Vietnamese want to end the bombing. On January 27, 1973, they sign the Paris Peace Accords. The war is over. Except it isn't. March 30th, 1972. Good Friday. The North Vietnamese launched the largest conventional military offensive since Tet. 125,000 NVA troops, 600 tanks, heavy artillery, surface-to-air missiles. This isn't guerrilla warfare anymore, is less than #0. 5# is greater than. This is a full-scale conventional invasion. 3 prongs. Across the DMZ into Quang Tri province. Out of Cambodia towards Saigon. Out of Laos into the Central Highlands. The NVA are testing something. Can ARVN survive without American ground troops? Because by March 1972, only 95,000 American soldiers remain in Vietnam, down from over 500,000 3 years earlier. And almost none are combat troops. They're advisors, support personnel, aircrew. Vietnamization's moment of truth. The attack is devastating. At Quang Tri, NVA forces overwhelm ARVN defences. T-54 and T-59 tanks roll through South Vietnamese positions. ARVN soldiers panic. Some units break and run. Officers abandon their troops. Within days, Quang Tri-City falls. 50,000 South Vietnamese troops and civilians flee south, clogging the roads, under artillery fire. It's chaos. At An Loc, north of Saigon, 15,000 ARVN troops are surrounded by 40,000 NVA. The city is under siege. On April 2nd, NVA forces launch their first attack on An Loc. Artillery bombardment is massive. 7,800 rounds in 10 hours. Then the tanks come. ARVN defenders have never faced this level of armoured assault. They're terrified. Some positions collapse. But some ARVN soldiers fight back. They use LAW rockets. Light anti-tank weapons provided by the Americans is less than #0. 5# is greater than they stop the tanks. Knock out dozens. American air power saves them. B. 52 bombers carpet bomb NVA positions. Tactical fighters hit artillery batteries. Helicopter gunships strafe infantry formations. Operation Linebacker 1 begins. Sustained bombing of North Vietnam resumes. After a 3-year pause, American planes are hitting targets in the north again. The Americans drop over 155,000 tons of bombs in 6 months. It works. By July, the Easter offensive has stalled. ARVN holds An Loc. They hold Kontum. In September, they even recapture Quang Tri-City. Nixon declares Vietnamization a success. See, ARVN can fight. They just need American air support. But everyone understands the real lesson. ARVN cannot survive without massive American air power. The moment the bombers leave, South Vietnam is finished. The North Vietnamese know it too. They've tested ARVN's limits. Wait until the Americans are completely gone. Then attack. Henry Kissinger has been secretly negotiating with North Vietnam's Le Duc Tho since 1969. 3 years of meetings. Getting nowhere. But by October 1972, Nixon needs a deal. The election is weeks away. He promised peace. Kissinger is under pressure to deliver. So he compromises. The October Agreement. America withdraws all troops within 60 days. North Vietnam returns all American prisoners of war is less than #. 0# is greater than. A ceasefire goes into effect. But here's the fatal clause. North Vietnamese troops currently in South Vietnam can stay there. 145,000 NVA soldiers are occupying parts of South Vietnam. The agreement doesn't require them to leave. They just have to stop fighting. For now, Kissinger knows exactly what this means. In private conversations with Nixon, he's brutally honest. If a year or 2 years from now, North Vietnam gobbles up South Vietnam, we can say, we're sorry, we did the best we could. The decent interval strategy. Get American troops out. Get POWs back. Let South Vietnam survive for a couple years. When it collapses, blame Saigon, not Washington. Kissinger announces on October 26. Peace is at hand. President Thieu explodes. He reads the agreement and understands immediately. This is surrender. Allowing NVA troops to stay in the south means the war will continue the moment American air power leaves. It means North Vietnam has achieved through negotiation what they couldn't achieve through force. Thieu refuses to sign. Nixon reassures him. Promises continued American aid. Promises air support if North Vietnam violates the ceasefire. Secret letters guarantee American intervention. It's all lies. Nixon knows Congress won't approve renewed military action. He knows American public opinion won't tolerate it. He's making promises he can't keep is less than Hashon. 5# is greater than, but Thieu has no choice. Sign the agreement, or America abandons him immediately. The negotiations stall through November. Thieu keeps objecting. Le Duc Tho makes new demands. Nixon gets angry. He needs to force everyone to sign. So in December, he drops the bombs. December 18 to 29, 1972. 11 days. The most intensive bombing campaign of the entire war. Linebacker 2. The Christmas bombing. Over 700 B-52 sorties. Over 1,500 civilians killed in Hanoi and Haiphong. Hospitals, residential areas, schools hit. Bach Mai Hospital in Hanoi, one of the largest medical facilities in North Vietnam, hit by B-52 bombs on December 22. 28 doctors and nurses killed. Dozens of patients. The maternity ward destroyed. International condemnation is swift. The Soviet Union calls it barbaric. Sweden compares it to Nazi atrocities. The Pope appeals for peace. But the bombing achieves its narrow goal. North Vietnam returns to negotiations. They make minor concessions. The agreement is slightly modified. It still allows NVA troops to remain in South Vietnam. On January 8, 1973, negotiations resume in Paris. By January 23, both sides initial the agreement. Kissinger and Le Duc Tho will share the 1973 Nobel Peace Prize for this. Le Duc Tho refuses to accept it is less than #0. 5# is greater than there is no peace in Vietnam. He's right. The final agreement is signed on January 27, 1973. The war is over. For America. March 29, 1973. The last American combat troops leave Vietnam. 58,220 Americans are dead. 304,000 wounded. Over $1 trillion spent in today's money. What did America achieve? South Vietnam still exists. For now. But everyone knows it's temporary. The ceasefire is a joke. Both sides violate it immediately. ARVN tries to recapture villages held by the NVA. The NVA defends and counterattacks. Low-level fighting continues across South Vietnam. But without American air power, Arven is slowly losing ground. America promised continued aid, $2.3 billion for 1973. Then Congress starts cutting. 1974. Aid drops to $1 billion. 1975. $700 million. ARVN runs out of ammunition, runs out of fuel, can't maintain equipment. Helicopters are grounded. Planes can't fly. Soldiers go unpaid for months. Morale collapses. Desertion rates spike. Meanwhile, North Vietnam receives continued support from the Soviet Union and China. They rebuild their army, repair the roads, stockpile supplies, improve the Ho Chi Minh Trail into an actual highway system is less than Hasson. 5# is greater than. By late 1974, they're ready. March 10, 1975. North Vietnam launches its final offensive. The target, Ban Mi Thuot, a city in the Central Highlands. 4 NVA divisions attack. 55,000 troops with tanks and artillery. They overwhelm the ARVN defenders in 3 days. President Thieu makes a fatal decision. Withdraw from the Central Highlands. Consolidate forces to defend Saigon and the coastal cities. It's a military disaster. The withdrawal turns into a rout. ARVN soldiers abandon their positions and flee. Officers leave their troops behind. Civilians clog the roads trying to escape. Entire divisions disintegrate. At Pleiku and Kontum, ARVN units retreat down Route 19 toward the coast. It becomes known as the Column of Tears. Soldiers, refugees, families, all mixed together, under artillery fire, attacked by NVA forces, panicked, desperate, dying. Only 20,000 out of 60,000 soldiers reach the coast. The rest are killed, captured, or deserted. The collapse accelerates. March 25. Hue falls without a fight. ARVN commanders flee before the battle starts. March 29. Da Nang falls. Vietnam's second largest city. 1 million refugees have fled there from the north. The docks are chaos. People fighting to get on boats. ARVN soldiers throwing away uniforms and weapons is less than Hasson. 0# is greater than trampling civilians to escape. Ships leaving the harbour are so overloaded they capsize. Hundreds drown. By early April, half of South Vietnam is lost. The ARVN has disintegrated. President Ford addresses Congress. Begs for emergency aid. $700 million. Congress refuses. South Vietnam is on its own. April 9th. The Battle of Xuan Loc begins. 40 miles northeast of Saigon. The ARVN 18th Division makes its last stand. 5,000 defenders against 40,000 NVA troops. They hold for 12 days, fighting desperately, inflicting heavy casualties. But no reinforcements come, no air support, no resupply. On April 21, Xuan Lock falls. The road to Saigon is open. April 21. President Thieu resigns in a bitter televised speech. He blames America for betraying South Vietnam. You have asked us to do an impossible thing. You have let our soldiers die under the hail of shells. Is an American's life worth more than a Vietnamese's? He's right. But it doesn't matter anymore. Thieu flees to Taiwan with 15 tons of luggage, including gold bars stolen from the National Treasury. April 29. The NVA reach the outskirts of Saigon. Artillery shells start landing in the city. The final evacuation begins. Operation Frequent Wind. Helicopters from aircraft carriers offshore fly into Saigon is less than #0. 5# is greater than landing at the American Embassy. At the Dow compound, evacuating Americans and high-risk Vietnamese. The embassy courtyard becomes chaos. Thousands of Vietnamese who worked for Americans, who believed American promises, desperate to escape. Marines push back crowds at the embassy gates. They can only take so many. The rest will be left behind. On the embassy roof, helicopters land every few minutes. Load up, take off. Land on carriers, refuel, return. 7,000 people evacuated in 19 hours. Tens of thousands more are left behind. April 30th, 1975. 7:15 a.m. The last helicopter lifts off from the embassy roof. 10:53 a.m. A North Vietnamese T-54 tank, number 843, crashes through the gates of the presidential palace. An NVA soldier runs up the steps, raises the flag of the Provisional Revolutionary Government. The war is over. 20 years. Millions dead. For nothing. February 17th, 1979. The People's Liberation Army of China invades Vietnam. Communist China invading Communist Vietnam. Yes. After 1975, Vietnam aligns more closely with the Soviet Union. They sign a mutual defense treaty. Soviet advisors flood into Vietnam. Soviet ships use Cam Ranh Bay. China is furious. The Sino-Soviet split has turned Moscow and Beijing into bitter enemies is less than #0. 5# is greater than China views. Soviet expansion in Southeast Asia as a threat. Then there's Cambodia. China supports the Khmer Rouge because the Khmer Rouge are anti-Vietnamese. And China wants to contain Vietnamese influence in Southeast Asia. But in December 1978, Vietnam invades Cambodia. They overthrow the Khmer Rouge. They install a pro-Vietnamese government. They end the genocide. China decides to teach Vietnam a lesson. February 17, 1979, China invades. The official number is 200,000 Chinese troops. Some estimates say up to 600,000. They attack across the border at multiple points, targeting provincial capitals in northern Vietnam. China expects a quick victory. Vietnam's best troops are in Cambodia. It's not quick. The Vietnamese fight viciously. They've been at war for 35 years. They know how to defend their territory. They use guerrilla tactics against the Chinese. Ambushes, booby traps, hit-and-run attacks. The same tactics they used against the French and Americans. The Chinese army is huge but poorly trained. Most of their troops have never seen combat. Their equipment is outdated. Their logistics are terrible. The fighting is fierce. By early March, China has captured several provincial capitals, but at heavy cost, and they're still far from Hanoi. Chinese logistics are collapsing is less than #0. 5# is greater than. Supply lines are overextended. Casualties are mounting. On March 5th, China announces victory, claims they've taught Vietnam a lesson, announces withdrawal. By March 16th, most Chinese forces are back across the border. What did China accomplish? They captured some territory temporarily, destroyed infrastructure, killed thousands of Vietnamese, then gave it all back and went home. Vietnam didn't withdraw from Cambodia. Their alliance with the Soviet Union didn't weaken. The casualties? China officially admits 26,000 killed. Some estimates go as high as 62,000. Plus wounded, the number could exceed 200,000. Vietnam admits 10,000 killed. Unofficial estimates range up to 50,000. For a month-long war, the losses are staggering. The supreme irony? The United States and China tacitly cooperated. America supported China's invasion diplomatically. Anything to weaken Soviet influence. So, let's be clear about what happened. Vietnam defeated the United States in 1975, then immediately invaded Cambodia to stop a genocide, then got invaded by China for invading Cambodia, and America supported China. The country that just lost 58,000 troops fighting communism in Vietnam now supports Communist China's invasion of Communist Vietnam. Because the enemy of our enemy is our friend. Even when none of it makes any moral sense, is less than #. 5# is greater than. Welcome to Cold War logic, where ideology trumps humanity every single time. After Saigon fell, a narrative emerged. America didn't really lose. We just quit. The military won every major battle. We had superior firepower, technology, training. We could have won if only the politicians had let us. If only the media hadn't turned the public against the war. If only the anti-war protesters hadn't stabbed our soldiers in the back. This is comfortable. It lets us avoid hard truths. But it's wrong. Let's address the "we never lost a battle" claim first. It's technically true that America won most large-scale conventional battles. Ia Drang, Hue, the Easter Offensive. When American and North Vietnamese forces met in open combat, American firepower usually prevailed. But that's irrelevant, because 96% of firefights involved fewer than 200 American troops. Most combat was small scale. Ambushes, patrols, raids, and the enemy initiated 75 to 80% of these engagements. Think about what that means. The enemy chose when and where to fight. They attacked when they had advantage. They withdrew when they didn't. They controlled the tempo of the war. So, claiming victory because we won the battles we fought is like a boxer saying he won because he landed more punches, while ignoring that his opponent chose every exchange and walked out of the ring whenever he wanted is less than hash-own. 5 hash is greater than. Then there's the body count problem. MacV claimed we killed 220,000 enemy per year at peak, reaching Westmoreland's crossover point where we killed them faster than they could replace fighters. Except the body counts were fabricated. Officers inflated numbers to advance their careers. Pilots guessed at kills after bombing runs. Ground troops counted any dead Vietnamese as enemy. If it's dead and Vietnamese, it's VC. The CIA's own estimates contradicted MACV's numbers. In 1967, MACV claimed only 242,000 enemy remained in South Vietnam. The CIA estimated 600,000. Someone was lying. But even if the body counts were accurate, they didn't matter. Because North Vietnam was willing to absorb the casualties. Le Duan, first secretary of North Vietnam's Communist Party, said it plainly. It is no longer a question of how many US troops are committed or how long they will stay. It is now a question of how we can fight a protracted war. They understood something the Pentagon didn't. This was a political war with military means, not a military war with political objectives. And military victories are irrelevant if you lose the political struggle. The Prussian military theorist Karl von Clausewitz wrote in the 19th century, "War is the continuation of politics by other means." Victory means using force to achieve political goals. The military component is just the means is less than #0. 5 hash is greater than not the end. America's political goal was creating a stable, legitimate, independent South Vietnamese government that could defend itself. We failed. Every major battle we won, every body count we inflated, every village we pacified, none of it created political legitimacy for the Saigon regime. And, without legitimacy, South Vietnam was doomed. A story illustrates this. After the war, an American colonel told a North Vietnamese colonel, "You know, you never beat us on the battlefield." The North Vietnamese officer thought for a moment, then replied, "That may be so, but it is also irrelevant." He was right. So why did America really lose? 5 fundamental errors, each one catastrophic. Together, they made defeat inevitable. Mistake 1. Misunderstanding the enemy. American policymakers saw the Vietnam War as part of global communist expansion. Moscow and Beijing pulling Ho Chi Minh's strings. Dominoes falling across Asia. They were wrong. This was a nationalist war. Vietnamese fighting for independence and reunification. Yes, North Vietnam received Soviet and Chinese aid, but Ho Chi Minh maintained independence from both. He played Moscow and Beijing against each other to maximize support while maintaining autonomy. The war wasn't about communism versus capitalism. It was about Vietnamese nationalism versus foreign occupation. First, the Japanese is less than #0. 5# is greater than, then the French, then the Americans. From the Vietnamese perspective, this was one continuous 30-year struggle for independence. By framing it as communist expansion, America misread the entire conflict. We treated symptoms of nationalism as evidence of communist conspiracy. Historian George Herring wrote, "By wrongly attributing the conflict to external sources, the United States drastically misjudged its internal dynamics. By intervening in what was essentially a local struggle, it placed itself at the mercy of local forces, a weak client, and a determined adversary. We were never fighting the war the Vietnamese were fighting." Mistake 2. The strategy of attrition and body counts. Westmoreland believed you could quantify your way to victory. Kill more than they can replace, and eventually they'll collapse. McNamara loved this. It was measurable. You could chart it. You could predict victory based on mathematical models. But war isn't math. The strategy ignored everything that couldn't be counted. Morale, popular support, political legitimacy, ideological conviction, the will to fight. As one historian put it, McNamara applied clumsy numerical values to complex socio-political issues. The result? Hamburger Hill, May 1969. The 101st Airborne Assaults, a fortified NVA position. 10 days of brutal fighting. 450 American casualties is less than #0. 0# is greater than, they take the hill. Then abandon it days later. The hill had no strategic value. It was just a number on Westmoreland's chart. American soldiers died for a body count. Journalist Jonathan Schell wrote, "The more we won, the more we lost." Mistake 3. Supporting an illegitimate government. From Diem in 1955 to Thieu in 1975, South Vietnam never developed a government its people wanted. Diem's regime was corrupt, repressive, dominated by Catholic elites in a Buddhist country. After his assassination, 5 governments rose and fell in 2 years. American diplomat William Bundy called Thuan Khai absolutely the bottom of the barrel. South Vietnam never created genuine national identity. The government was seen as an American puppet, a continuation of foreign occupation. An ARVN soldier, captured after the war, explained, "When they said we were fighting against communism, nobody understood what that meant. We were fighting other Vietnamese. Other Vietnamese were fighting foreigners. In our hearts, we had sympathy for the other side." North Vietnam had clear political goals: unification, independence, national sovereignty, worth dying for. South Vietnam's goal? Anti-communism. Status quo. Vague promises of democracy that never materialized. You can't build a nation on negatives. Mistake 4. Believing military power could substitute for political legitimacy is less than #3. 0 is greater than. Even with unlimited resources, you cannot make people accept a government they don't want. Some argue America lost because of political constraints. We couldn't invade North Vietnam. We couldn't cut the Ho Chi Minh Trail effectively. Congress eventually limited our options. But when constraints were lifted, operations failed anyway. Cambodia invasion. Temporary disruption, no lasting effect. Laos invasion. ARVN routed. Linebacker. 2 Christmas bombing. Caused damage. Didn't break North Vietnam's will. The real constraint wasn't military. It was political. You cannot impose political legitimacy through military force. We could have invaded North Vietnam. It wouldn't have created a legitimate South Vietnamese government. We could have carpet-bombed Hanoi to rubble. It wouldn't have made South Vietnamese civilians support Thieu. The fundamental problem was unfixable with bombs and bullets. Mistake 5. Underestimating North Vietnamese will. American planners assumed North Vietnam had limits. 20 million population. Agrarian economy. Eventually, they'd run out of men and resources. They were wrong. Le Duan said it clearly. The North will not count the cost. 30 years of continuous warfare had hardened the North Vietnamese population. They'd survived Japanese occupation, French colonial war, American bombing. Revolutionary unification was worth any sacrifice, is less than Hasson. 5 is greater than. Meanwhile, stakes for America were ideological, not existential. Important, yes. Worth unlimited sacrifice? No. The War of Wills was decided before it began. American public support collapsed. 1965. 61% supported the war. 1971. 60% wanted immediate withdrawal. North Vietnamese morale remained strong despite hardship. General Vo Nguyen Giap understood this. War is fought on many fronts. The most important front is American public opinion. He was right. The North Vietnamese won because they were willing to endure what Americans were not. These 5 mistakes weren't tactical errors. They were fundamental strategic failures. And they made defeat inevitable. Give credit where it's due. North Vietnam didn't just win because America made mistakes. They won because they fought brilliantly. Strategic flexibility. They shifted between conventional and guerrilla warfare as circumstances required. After Ia Drang in 65, they avoided large battles and emphasized guerrilla tactics. After Tet in 68, they rebuilt and returned to conventional operations for the Easter Offensive in 72. Finally, a conventional blitzkrieg in 75. They adapted constantly, never dogmatic, always pragmatic. Patience and sacrifice. They understood time was on their side. They could absorb horrific casualties and continue fighting is less than Hasson. 5 hash is greater than. General Giap explained their philosophy. Westmoreland didn't believe in human beings. He believed in numbers. He believed in weapons and material. But military power is not the decisive factor in war. Human beings are the decisive factor. Understanding the enemy. North Vietnamese leaders studied American democracy. They identified public opinion as America's strategic vulnerability. They targeted American will through Tet, through casualties, through protracted struggle. Giap was explicit. The most important front was American public opinion. Home field advantage. They fought for survival, independence, unification, existential stakes. On their own territory, among their own people. America fought for abstract containment theory. Ideological stakes. 8,000 miles from home. The Vietnamese had everything to lose. America had a political theory to defend. That asymmetry decided the war. North Vietnam won because they understood what kind of war they were fighting. A political struggle with military means. America lost because they thought it was a military problem with political complications. That fundamental misunderstanding cost 58,000 American lives and over 3 million Vietnamese lives. The lesson was clear in 1975. The question is, did we learn it? The final toll. United States. 58,220 killed is less than Hasson. 0 hash is greater than 304,000 wounded. Over $1 trillion in today's money. An entire generation scarred. Vietnam. Up to 2 million civilians killed. 1 million North Vietnamese and Viet Cong military dead. 250,000 South Vietnamese military killed. Millions wounded, displaced, destroyed. 3.4 million Vietnamese deaths total. The scars that remained. Agent Orange. 20 million gallons sprayed. Causes cancer, birth defects in both Vietnamese and American veterans. 3rd generation, still affected today. Unexploded ordnance. 2.75 million tons of bombs dropped on Laos alone. Up to 1/3 failed to explode. Landmines throughout Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, still killing people today, especially children. Vietnam under communism. Re-education camps. 200 to 300,000 South Vietnamese imprisoned. Former ARVN soldiers, government officials, intellectuals. Years of forced labor, political indoctrination. Some executions, scale disputed. Boat people. 2 million flee Vietnam by 1979. Dangerous sea journeys. Many drown. Refugee camps in Thailand, Malaysia, Philippines. Eventual resettlement in America, Australia, Canada, France. Economic devastation. The country is destroyed. Infrastructure ruined. Agriculture collapsed. North imposes centralized communist economy on the South is less than Hashone. 5 hash is greater than. Some Southern revolutionaries who fought alongside the Viet Cong are bitterly disappointed. They expected pluralistic government. They got totalitarian control. Truong Nhu Tang, a former minister in the Provisional Revolutionary Government, later writes, "The traditions and culture of the South would be ground up by the political machine of the conquerors. Economic reforms eventually come. Doi Moi in 1986. Market liberalization. Vietnam opens to the world. For America, different scars. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. 58,220 names on black granite. Each one a life destroyed, a family shattered, a future erased. Veterans return home to a divided country. Some are spat on, called baby killers. Many struggle with PTSD, addiction, unemployment. The government that sent them to war abandons them when they return. Trust in government collapses. If they lied about Vietnam, what else are they lying about? A generation becomes cynical about American power, about military intervention, about government honesty. The Vietnam Syndrome. A reluctance for foreign military intervention. A fear of getting trapped in another quagmire. A question that haunts every foreign policy debate for the next 50 years. Is this another Vietnam? For 15 years after Saigon fell, America is cautious. The military is demoralized, is less than #0. 5 hash is greater than feels, betrayed by civilian leadership, media, anti-war protesters. The stabbed in the back narrative takes hold. Congress passes the War Powers Act in 1973, limiting presidential authority to wage war without congressional approval. Too late for Vietnam, but maybe it'll prevent the next one. American public is exhausted. 1975 survey. Only 36% believe America should keep commitments to defend other nations. No more Vietnams becomes a rallying cry. Then comes the 1980s. President Ronald Reagan reframes the narrative. Vietnam wasn't a mistake. It was a noble cause betrayed by weak politicians and biased media. He restores American confidence through small victories. Grenada invasion in 83. Quick, decisive, successful. Libya bombing in 86. Shows American strength. The military reforms itself. All volunteer force replaces the draft. Better training, better equipment, better leadership. The Powell Doctrine emerges. Overwhelming force, clear objectives, exit strategy. Then, 1991. The Gulf War. Iraq invades Kuwait. America leads a coalition to liberate it. 500,000 troops. 6 weeks of air campaign. 100 hours of ground combat. Total victory. President George H.W. Bush declares, "By God, we've kicked the Vietnam syndrome once and for all is less than #. 5 hash is greater than America believes him." Technology and training can overcome any enemy. Quick wars with minimal casualties. Precision weapons, smart bombs, overwhelming force. This is how modern war works. We forgot the lesson. Because the Gulf War wasn't Vietnam. It was a conventional war against a conventional army. Clear objectives. International support. No insurgency. No nation building. Get in, win, get out. Vietnam was something else entirely. But American confidence is restored. The military is redeemed. We can win wars again. 10 years later, that confidence will lead us into two wars that look disturbingly familiar. September 11, 2001. America invades Afghanistan, hunt down Al-Qaeda, overthrow the Taliban, install a democratic government. 20 years later, August 2021, helicopters evacuate the American embassy in Kabul as the Taliban roll into the city. The images are identical to Saigon. March 2003. America invades Iraq, looking for weapons of mass destruction that don't exist. Just like the Gulf of Tonkin attack that never happened. 8 years of occupation, sectarian violence, insurgency, nation-building failures, trillions of dollars spent, thousands of American lives lost. For what? Afghanistan and Iraq aren't exact replays of Vietnam. Different circumstances, different enemies, different mistakes is less than Hashone. Zero hash is greater than, but the patterns are hauntingly similar. Supporting unpopular governments, underestimating local forces, believing military power can solve political problems, mistaking temporary victories for lasting success. The lesson of Vietnam was clear. Historian George Herring wrote, "If there is one general historical lesson, it is that local history and culture set real limits on the effectiveness of external force, no matter how great that force may be." America learned that lesson in Vietnam, then forgot it, then learned it again in Afghanistan, and Iraq, and maybe we'll forget it again. Because the uncomfortable truth is this. The lessons of Vietnam weren't politically convenient. They challenged American exceptionalism. They suggested limits to American power. They implied that sometimes, despite our wealth and technology and good intentions, we simply cannot fix other countries' problems. That's a hard lesson for a superpower to accept. So, we keep forgetting it. Today, 50 years after Saigon fell, something strange has happened. 75% of Vietnamese view the United States favorably. Only 33% of Americans reciprocate. The roles have reversed. US-Vietnam trade exceeds $100 billion annually. Vietnam manufactures products for Nike, Apple, Samsung. Former enemies are now trading partners. And, ironically, both countries now worry about the same threat is less than Hashone. Zero hash is greater than China. Vietnam seeks American support against Chinese territorial claims in the South China Sea. We're informally allied against the country we claimed Vietnam was a puppet of. The dominoes never fell. But the scars remain. In Laos, children still die from cluster bombs dropped 50 years ago. The most bombed country per capita in history. In Vietnam, third-generation birth defects from Agent Orange. Farmers still plow around unexploded ordnance. In America, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial stands in Washington. 58,220 names carved in black granite. Each one a life that mattered. Each one a family destroyed. What if we'd listened to General Ridgway in 1954 when he warned against Asian land wars? What if we'd honored the Geneva Accords and allowed elections in 1956? What if we'd understood that nationalism, not communism, drove the Vietnamese struggle? 58,000 Americans might still be alive. 3 million Vietnamese might never have died. The lesson of Vietnam is simple. No amount of military power can force a people to accept a government they don't want. No amount of firepower can substitute for political legitimacy. And when one side is fighting for survival, while your side just wants to go home, you've already lost. That lesson was purchased with millions of lives. The question is, will we remember it? Or 50 years from now, will someone be recording another documentary about another lost war? Asking the same questions, learning the same lessons that we keep refusing to learn? The Vietnam War ended in 1975. But its ghosts still haunt every foreign battlefield. Because the war that was supposed to stop communist dominoes from falling instead proved something far more important. Even superpowers have limits. Thank you for listening.